Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to make a video about my reaction towards the oral boards for oral maxillofacial surgery. I took my board in 2009, February 5th. In this video, I'm going to cover the time when I first showed up to the Warwick Hotel. This is in Dallas, Texas. The day of my board, my experience going through the board, and then my reaction to the test I took, as well as the experience I had leading up to the results. So I arrived at Warwick Hotel on February 2nd, which is a Saturday, and my boards was on February 5th in the PM session. One thing I read was that you're supposed to check in for the hotel and the board, and I wasn't really sure in terms of when can you actually check into, check in with ABOMS for your boards. So what actually happens is that you check in to your boards. If you're at the AM session, you check in the morning. There's going to be a small breakfast that's served for you. And if you're in the afternoon, you check in around, I think, in the afternoon, maybe like 11:30, and there's a lunch prepared for you. They do it in a way that when the afternoon examinees are going to the testing center, they just miss the bus of the morning session coming back. So in terms of, the question is, do you check in with ABOMS anytime during that period? The answer is no. Like, I got there Saturday. I could not have checked in on Monday, even though I wasn't there. And they're like, no, you check in right before your examination slot. In terms of what I did leading up to the exam, as soon as I got there, checked in and started studying. I felt like being in that hotel, I was way more nervous and way more anxious than being at home. And the only thing that I did besides eat was to study, and that kind of made me feel better, like I was doing something in order to improve my odds of passing this exam. Of course, there was a lot of agony, and it was a combination of me studying by myself, going over my sample cases as well as the key numbers, and also calling up my friends to go over mock cases with them. We would ask questions and flip-flop for different topics. Now, on the actual day of the exam, I was in the PM session. As soon as you check in, even though there's lunch, hardly anybody ate. There was plenty of coffee, so I loaded up on that. The night before, I probably slept for maybe 3 hours at the max. I was just so anxious. I was probably studying until 1 o'clock in the morning, and I only stopped studying because I told myself I needed to get sleep, rather than I felt like there was everything I needed to know. There was definitely a lot more things I felt I needed to memorize. At that particular point, I think it's fairly common talking to people afterwards that when you're studying at that moment, it's like one thing goes into your head, you finally memorized it, another thing goes out the window. So don't be surprised if that's kind of the way that you feel. Also, when you come off the bus and you go into your room, realize that there are going to be 2 examiners that comes in per section, and every section has 4 topics. You don't know which topics you are, but they are going to tell you which section you are in. So at least you have an idea of what those 4 topics may be. In terms of the actual exam, what I found to be most surprising was the pace of the questioning. I think I covered this in my first video in terms of the flow that me and my partners has practiced with. I felt like on the actual exam it was much faster. I want to say, like, it almost felt like you get a question every like about 3-4 questions every minute, and they cut you off, and they'll actually tell you that they'll cut you off during the I guess a little session they give you before taking the exam, but they really do a good job of consolidating your answers and cutting you off. And if I were to take this test again, one thing I would do is kind of have very concise answers, not in the form of sentences, but phrases, keywords. That way, I think you would maximize your chances of getting scores on that particular question. One of the things that I remember people were talking about when I went to the Bethesda course was that the examiner and you supposed to kind of have like almost like a ping pong match. You hit the ball, rally back and forth, and that's exactly how I felt, except it's much faster than I expected. And I think my baseline of what I was expecting is between what I practiced with my partners and also what I saw in Nashville. And if you guys go to Nashville, just imagine what the pace that they have, but probably 2 to 3 times as fast. As soon as you don't know something, like they're gonna just push you through. There's no you thinking about it. Another thing I felt that was very difficult, at least for me, is formulating my ideas and trying to, in a way, speak in the most concise manner in order to orchestrate or demonstrate my knowledge. So they will ask a question, and in my head, I am thinking about all sorts of things. And by the time I get a few words out, they're cutting you off, and you're going to the next question. So it's like your brain is on overdrive, and you have a limit of how much you can limit on how many words you can use to express those ideas that you have in your head. Anyways, that was extremely frustrating for me, and I think for the whole test, so I had, obviously all 4 sections I felt that way. It was just rapid fire for every single one. In terms of the content of the test, I felt like the test was very fair. All the questions that were asked of me, I should know. One thing I want to stress is that it's really important, especially when you go to the Nashville course, that you definitely have an idea of the stock questions that they have, and also the algorithm that they're going down. At Nashville, you have 3 days of just questions after questions, cases after cases, so you see a pattern developing. And on the real exam, those patterns kind of fall where they are. So by going over your physical exam, going over your symptoms, signs, and finally radiographic findings, you pretty much narrow what your diagnoses are, and after that you kind of have an idea of what kind of question they're going to be asking you. And this gets to my second part. So once you understand the algorithm, they really try to, I think, test the depth of your knowledge. And this is where I think, regardless of who you are, based on the answers they give, based on the answer you give, they're going to make you sweat by asking a lot tougher, in-depth, specific questions. And I don't exactly know how you would study for that. If I were to study for this test again, I would focus much more on the algorithm tree, so I could manage a case much more much more smoothly, I guess, because I think a lot of the questions they ask are going to be big forks in the treatment plan, and you really have to have those things kind of well thought out, just like you're supposed to have a good list of answers on their stock questions. And this is what I think Nashville prepares you very well for. Now, I think a lot of times people will get into the weeds by studying the very finite details, and this is something that I wish I didn't do, because there were so many things I knew that just never got tested, because we were focusing on the bigger, management questions. Now, in terms of my immediate reaction afterwards, I thought I failed. And I just want you guys to know, talking to some people afterwards, just regards to like how they felt like they did, I think that reaction is very, very common. And this goes back to the idea of your examiners, it's really testing you. I don't exactly know how many questions they have in their test bank per se, but I do feel like regardless of what answers you give, regardless of whether you know the algorithm for management or not, they're going to ask you questions that will make you sweat, make you stress out. And at the end of the day, I think it's actually normal to feel, hey, I didn't do so good, and reflect over your answers. You're like, and think that you could have answered some things better. And that's exactly how I felt. One of the hardest things after taking the test was the anxiety of waiting for the results. Over at Bethesda, I heard that if you were to go online to ABOMS website and you click on Find a Diplomat, you could try to input your last name, and that would actually allow you to know a little ahead of time, before the paper mail got to you, whether you passed or not. So if you are a diplomat, obviously you passed. What happened was, I took it on the 5th, and I found out my results on May 8th. And the way I found out is that you go in to ABOMS login, and then under the exam history, just like your written exam, it's going to show the status as pass if you did. In terms of Find a Diplomat, I think maybe like a week later, the online database got updated. So if you were to put in your last name, you know that you have passed. But before that, you don't. I think the actual results of you passing or not happens on March 1st. Because if you download the letter saying that you are officially a diplomat, that is the date that it's used to verify your status. Anyways, I hope that helps to give you guys an idea of what to expect about the oral boards, some of the emotional turmoil you might be facing before, during, and even afterwards. But hopefully everyone passes, and at the end of the day, know that this is kind of the final hurdle you have to do for your education after dental school, residency, written and oral. You're finally board certified oral surgeon, and you can enjoy life and enjoy your practice. All right, and hope everyone have a good day. See you later.